It's a lot better, but you can see where I had him. I had him above Sainer still, right? I had him above, well, Tampa's actually fallen, which we've seen now. Max Melton, I had him way above Ronaldo Green. You guys know this. So one of the things that I had wrote down, not only did I write down slot flexibility, I wrote down well-rounded, heavy zone usage. And man, the pushback. Guys, if I could find this video, ooh, boy, I'm going to find it. I'm going to clip it, and I'm going to post it.
On quarterback, Tennessee, Jets, inspiration, all of the debate round will come.
Bro, that's the end of it. That's the end of it. You guys see who's at 29, though, right? You guys see who's at 29 on that board.
Top.
I'm going to post it if I find it. Bleacher, don't let me find this, man. The comment section, bro, when I took Rakestraw. He's a zone-heavy corner, but you're going to play man coverage. And I tried to tell him, man. I was like, yo, hold up. He played zone-heavy. I agree. Zone-heavy scheme, absolutely. But he's got man skills. He can play man coverage, bro. Okay, testing scores 13 bench press reps. I love that. All right, strong cornerback, especially for being on the smaller side build-wise. He's strong, though, and that helps him a ton with the slot flexibility. I even thought there was some safety flexibility. When man said backup safety, I even think there's some of that in there. Like, he could potentially move to safety if he wanted him to. What he lacks production-wise are ball skills in terms of he doesn't have a lot of plays on the football specifically. So I think that's probably the biggest reason he fell, because for our critical factors, one of them was always ball skills, and I don't know that every team does like this. I just know that an NFL team at one point did it like this, and one of those are ball skills. And when that's on the lower side, that's one of your top three. Arnold, I told you yesterday, he had 5 picks. He was great in that category. Players lower here, he doesn't really have production on the football like that, but the transition ability, the reactive athleticism, the play speed was average to me. I'll point that out. The run support was elite. This was the reason I took him, man. I took him because when I was sitting there, I said, look, Nate Wiggins to me is the best corner on the clock right here, just based on where the board was at. But Ennis Rakestraw Jr. is a Detroit Lion. So going for the Lions pick, Rakestraw is who the Lions take. The Lions, to me, would not take him. I don't know, maybe they would have. But they would have taken Rakestraw Jr. And now we're seeing that. And this is why. And I want to just start here because I gave him I was pressing an elite grade with him. So he was one of my best run defenders. Great run support. It'll set the edge right as a cornerback. So receiver comes up on him. They'll get their hands on the receiver. They'll kind of lock out. And then they'll sit there and they'll try to force it inside. You'll get that. All right, I like that. He was the type of guy to do that. As soon as the ball got away from him, he's like, I'm going to find a football. Like that. He had that dog in him of like a Brian Branch. Like that's the vibes I was getting. And if you guys remember, like if you watch my breakdown on Branch, highest grade I gave him, run support. And I mean, I don't think we can say enough how much DBs. I mean, let's just pull it back to this. I know we're going kind of sidetrack here. That's not even talking about this pick specifically, but we can. Think about how much DBs impacted the Lions' run defense. You guys remember when our run defense was struggling? Going back to, I believe this was more 2022. I think it was 2022. Okuda was here. And the Lions run defense was struggling. And they're like, hey, the defensive backs, they changed up things schematically. Defensive backs were stepping in the box over tight ends. They were having to help us in run support. And when those guys were helping us, my goodness, we could stop the run. It was huge. It was like, schematically speaking, it's kind of like, how we stop the run with the blitz and we create negatives. Defensive backs changed so much for us as a run defense. It's part of the reason right now where when you look at our run defensive stats and you see how good the Lions are in yards per carry, it was still like, hey, DJ Reader's going to change this defense. Because even though we're really good there, we create negatives by blitzing. Defensive backs are such a crucial part of this run defense. And the Lions have since then valued that in every defensive back they have added. Like, you have to have run support. It's got to be there. You have to be able to tackle. We heard it from Brad Holmes today. You have to be able to. Jaron Arnold, great tackler. That's why I didn't think they'd go with Wiggins. Today, even better run defender, in my opinion. So that value, oh my good, that value was massive then. And I'll give you an example. We played Carolina that year. It was bad. And our defensive backs and run support, they were bad. And it was called out. It was like, yo, this was not up to par, bro. We are not making plays against the run. And then you go to games like Dallas. You guys remember that? And it was like, oh, we're stopping the run. And Okuda was going crazy. He's hitting everybody. Defensive backs changed this run defense as a defensive back, as a cornerback. And the Lions have continued to throw those guys into this mix. Everybody has to be able to tackle. So I don't want to overlook that, because I think depending on what team, you are, like, you could overlook those things. The Lions have showed us they're not going to overlook that at all. I already know what I wrote down. I'm getting fired up. Press coverage, he was great. And when you do that from slot and length, jam corner, resets his hands into hips, mirrors first movement really well. You'll get a lot of those false steps, mirrors it really well. Foot patience and press, hips open, but not overly leaning, plays with great balance, which is one thing I love in corners. Christian Gonzalez had it. I thought Kool-Aid had it. This player has that really good balance when he's opening up. Stop, start, flexion, easy mirror, and then fast, short steps, which definitely can help him for more of the slot position. Reminded me of a guy like Roger McCreary out of Auburn who played wide corner. He was undersized, but this player isn't undersized, right? He's pushing 6 foot tall. So let just start there. All right. I gave him a very good grade, a 6.5 as a press corner. Give him a good grade in off-man coverage, which is fine. Good grade there. Keys on the quarterback drop. Very good patient foot speed. Great pacing. Immediate angles, which are proactive. This was the biggest thing, bro. Just pull it back for a second, okay? Already stepping down on top of the receiver, and then he's right in front of him. Look, boop. Now he's on top of it. He's taking that ball away. So the ball skills, right, hasn't had the production. But when you're taking proper angles, sometimes they just don't throw it to you. When we show this guy, here's what's going to stand out to you. When they run drags and he jumps over top of them, like he takes angles to step in front of them, or he'll take an angle from behind to just run underneath it. When he does things like that, you're like, oh, okay, right? Whether you want to call it anticipation or football intelligence or just awareness or, you know, route awareness, right? Being able to kind of understand what route is being developed on the play and like, all right, what's happening here? That is there. And that allows slot play. That allows slot play, man, because you can put him in the inside. Things are happening fast and he hangs. So it's like that flexibility is massive. We know Lions love that. And you know what's crazy about all this? So I've given him good grades here. My highest grades in zone coverage. So I like him in the spot. Highest grades in zone coverage. I just read that. Highest grades in zone coverage. A fast cover for communication. Uses peripheral vision very well to overlap coverage. Cover 2 underneath. Field side angles. That's where I get my highest grade. So this is why I liked him so much, because it wasn't that his critical factors all stood out because the ball skills were, you know, a little bit underneath because he just doesn't have much production there. Transition ability, reactive athleticism, those are good. Play speed, you know, it's average. But it's the fact that in all different schematic spots, press coverage, off-man, zone, I have really good grades. To be honest, and I can show y'all if you want, my grades for his press, off-man, and zone are better across the board. Not like to say like, okay, one's better. Like I thought Terrion was a little bit better of a press corner, but in general, he has higher grades than I have for Terrion Arnold. I just think Terrion Arnold hits the critical factors out of the park. Ball skills, reactive athleticism, he hits those out of the park. And he plays faster, but he hits all the other things. Like the flexibility is endless with this guy. That's why I think he can play slot, and we saw him do it. He can play safety if you want him to. He can play wide corner. Okay, let me read what I wrote at the bottom. I'm just going to read this word for word. Super reactive and anticipation heavy. Shut off drags. Also can be set up with average recovery burst. So there you go. Back to the play speed. Cover 2, aggression, changes approach at the snap. I'm just reading out what I got. That way none of this is biased. This is what I thought of the player. Also, I'm going to say this. I think we might be figuring something out. Oh my gosh, the ones just piled in. You guys were surprised too. I'm telling y'all, it was just like the first draft with Brad when we put back DTs. Now we're still trying to find out on Levi. There is a ton of ones. I see y'all. Not at all. A lot of ones. And hopefully the Levi thing works out health-wise. But I think it's also like the reason that shocked me is one, I didn't know who Aleem McNeil was before the draft. I knew of Levi, didn't know who Aleem was before the draft, straight up. So what's huge here about Ennis is that knowing the player, you can simply then just take, if you're saying, okay, best player available, now you understand it. But then once you also understand that there's so much flexibility, and now you're like, wait a minute, he's a great run support. You can move branch around now. You have injuries at safety. You can just move. He can play outside, inside. Like once you start to get that, it's kind of like a Aleem where you're like back-to-back DTs, but you don't maybe realize like, well, one's a nose, one's going to line up outside of a guard. It's very different. Both DTs, but very different. This is what this kind of feels like here. Not very different, I wouldn't say, but the flexibility is there. I think Terrion could honestly play in the slot too. You have to keep in mind, think about this. The last season, the Lions, Levi was coming off an injury. We only saw him a little bit, but the Lions bought into Levi. Like they believed in Levi. They gave him an opportunity. They left the door open for him to step in and go, right? They left the door open for him to play and prove himself. And we saw a little bit of that, but they left it open. They say they're going to build through the draft, right? So when you say you're about to build through the draft, you then have to believe in those draft picks. Like those are their guys. And what they did with Levi last season, really not addressing interior defensive line. It was like, hey, we got Levi, we got Aleem, we're going to be good here. And they added Broderick Martin, but they didn't add anybody with Levi. And unfortunately with injury stuff like that, we had to see guys like Alu and other guys kind of step in, try to give us some things. Think about what the Lions have done at defensive end, right? If the Lions, let's just say this, for example, let's just make it simple. Say the Lions would have taken a defensive end at 61. Right, let's just say they would have taken a defensive end. Where did they take Josh Paschal? 46, I think, 46. So when they took Josh Pascal, knowing that he was coming off an injury, so it was going to take some time, they believed in that guy being a future piece. They believe in Ennis Rakestraw being a future piece. It might take some time, development. Dan Campbell's already told us that, like outside of the top 15. So the fact that when they made that pick, they believed in that guy. Like, this could be a long-term piece. And with that investment, right, and now you have the best defensive line coach, which hopefully is going to pull. That's a great point. When you make that investment, you have Hutchinson, you've invested in Aleem, you still got Levi, and we're not talking about interior. But to me, Josh Pascal's going to have a role. Like, I think in the Lions' vision, Pascal's going to be a huge part of this team. And I think it's really easy for us, and for me, I do it too, I get caught up in this, to just kind of overlook this guy, right? And I understand, like, you need things to offset it. And I could understand, like, hey, if you want to go like a Sandbacker, Barnes is probably going to play some of that role. We'll have to see on Houston. You have Betts in the building. Maybe they'll want to add someone else to that mix. And I think edge right now, you know, there's going to be those tweener types that you can get a little bit later in this draft if you wanted to do that. But most of the time, you're not playing packages where you have a Sandbacker on the field, right? Nickel package is 60+% of the league. I think it's like 65% of the league runs that down to down. So meaning you have at least 3 receivers on the field, which means that defensively, most of the time, you're not going to have 7 guys in the box. You're going to have 6. And for the Lions, a lot of times it's 4 down linemen and it's 2 off-ball linebackers. And then you'll put that slot in because guess what? You got Brian Branch and now you got Rakestraw. And these guys aren't coming off the field. And the reason Lions feel comfortable doing that, Lions believe these guys are going to tackle. They trust they're going to tackle. Brian Branch was arguably our best run defender last season, regardless of position. Straight up. He might have been the best run defender that we had last. You're not living out there with, okay, Josh Pascal and someone next to him. Majority of the time, they're putting one defensive end on one side, which is Josh Pascal, and the opposite is going to be Hutch. Those guys are going to take a majority of the snaps. And now the Lions went out and they said, let's go get Davenport. So now you have a rotation automatically there, right? Likely. And Davenport can stand up a little bit too. So if you want to slide him outside, he can also still step into the James Houston role. He's done that, right? He's a freakish athlete. He's dropped into coverage. He played a stand-up role at UTSA. So now he can do that too, but he can also rotate because of his play style with Pascal. So what I'm saying is, it's not that you can't add to it, but the Lions, I don't believe they're like, we're off with Josh Pascal. He's not that guy. Marcus Davenport brings a different skill set. He's not the best edge rusher, but it is a thing, man. I mean, there's always going to be debate, well, coverage versus pressure, that kind of thing. You know, I lean on, I think we needed coverage more than pressure. I think Hutchinson proved that last season. There's certain positions where, like tackle, right? If you wait on tackle, you go round 3 on tackle, it's going to be hard to find the athlete that's there. Similar to edge, if you're going to find a guy that's a pure defensive end that's going to start, that can not only stop the run, but can also rush the passer, like at a really high level, the odds of you, like, that's going to take a big, I mean, that's going to take a legitimate draft. There's a reason every year the draft is defensive end, defensive end, defensive end. Every year. First defensive player this year, what was it? Was it not Dallas Turner? It may have been second. Like, there's a reason those guys go top, and even Dallas Turner is 247. So the investment that takes, and I don't even know if Dallas is that guy. They didn't have many of those guys this year. So now you have that. Finding that is finding Aiden Hutchinson. It's finding that piece. And that's the thing I think that's important about this is it's not one of those picks that you can just get. It's not like you can just throw a 4th round pick and be like, that's the all down guy right there. You might find your Houston that can step in and rush passer. And that's awesome. Everybody wants pass rushers. You might find your run defender, but if you can get a mix of both, that's what you're looking for. And the Lions, while they may not have an elite pass rusher here, they just want someone that's going to knock back your tackle. I do agree. The Lions need to add edge. They need to add depth. They got to get someone behind Hutchinson. I completely agree on that. I think that they will. I think you can argue you should add interior defensive line too. But now once you get out of the early downs, you're looking at this for early downs. Right? We're talking about defensive end for first down, second down a majority of the time, sometimes second down, depending on how long second down is, where you're talking about both of these guys that can not only stop the run rush pass, you have to stop the run on early downs. But it's on pass downs. Okay, now all of a sudden it kind of becomes irrelevant because Pascal's going to kick inside. You know, you're not really worried about the run and pass down. So you don't need guys that can do both. Now this is when designated pass rusher James Houston, he makes a ton of sense. It's like, all right, we don't have any fear here. Just put him out there. And I think you can find those guys throughout the draft. But finding the guy that does both, Davenport from the looks will be DN2. I agree. I love Davenport. I think Davenport gets extended. It's about the injuries. But every time he's been on the field, I mean, check the stats. I can pull him back up. This guy had a higher pressure rate, I think, every single season with the New Orleans Saints than what Jonathan Greener did, who just had double-digit sacks. I think a big part of that, Will Anderson. Other big part of that, they could cover. You can cover, man. You can get home. He did not have the same pressure rate that guy did, yet he had like 12 and a half sacks this past season. It popped statistically. So I think that's what has to be kept in mind is like, Josh Pascal was a legitimate draft pick. It's going to be hard to get that piece. You can get a designated pass rusher. I think the Lions will try to get one of those. But, man, you need a pocket crusher. And Marcus Davenport, You got to remember, this guy was with the Saints, man. He was with Dan Campbell. If Dan Campbell doesn't trust his character or buy into the guy's going to try to play through an injury, you think you would have signed him? You think it would have been like, yeah, Brad, go make that move? Absolutely not. They traded up for 14. They essentially made the move that I thought you would have had to make to go get Jared Verse this year. And he went a little bit later than that. But that's why I pointed similarities to it, because like it's kind of similar, right? You have your forceful player. Marcus Davenport's shown that. He just needs to consistently be out there. And he was just rotational, but he's with the New Orleans Saints. But it's hard to get those guys. So you take swings in free agency of the 14th pick, and these high draft picks makes a ton of sense. But my point is, you weren't going to find that at 61. Like, if we just let's just do this. Okay. You had Marshawn Nealand, who I don't think the Lions, I'm not personally a huge Marshawn Nealand guy, but again, you have Josh Pascal. But if we go beyond that, because that would have been before us, is there any defensive end that's even selected? Jonah Ellis, not that. To me, Jonah Ellis is a Sam linebacker. Which is basically, what we have. Let me continue. Jalix Hunt, not that. I mean, Jalix Hunt, he played at Houston Christian, right? This is a guy, I like him. He's a nice edge. He's got upside, but it's not there right now. This guy was playing safety 2 years ago. Okay. Let me see if there's no one even else. That was it. That's what you had. That's what you had at that position. Those guys, and even this year, especially, like, to be fair to what the draft is, if you're just playing through the draft, those guys weren't in this draft, man. You would have had to go get You would have had to go get Darius Robinson, who a lot of people thought wasn't going to be round 1. That guy went before our pick would have been. He went at 27. And Darius Robinson he doesn't have much agility. Darius Robinson has played defense for 1 season. At some point, they're going to draft a guy they can get after the quarterback. It's probably going to be a designated pass rusher. It could be interior. It could be edge. It could be off-ball linebacker that can step down. It could be that. They're going to do something there. But I also know that there's a role for Pascal, because if the Lions, let's say the Lions would trade up to 27 or whatever and took Darius Robinson, and I love Darius Robinson, I wouldn't have been mad at it. But to be honest, what is now the role for Pascal? Is he just a backup? And I didn't even mention John Kaminsky. Like, John Kaminsky plays DN. I understand he's on big. Those guys play DN and format fronts, and that's the majority of the time what you're in. They play DN and format fronts because they bring the physicality opposite of Hutchinson to let him win. That way you can collapse the pocket opposite. We see the trend of body type. They go opposite. Kaminsky, Pascal, like, there's a body type they're looking for. Davenport, they're all the same. They're force guys. They're going to rush through the pocket. They're bull rush, right? They're freakish. Those guys are just driving people back. That's what they want, pocket collapsers. And then you'll have to have those mix of pass rushers. But even to that point, just kind of off topic real quick, Aaron Glenn's told us this. He likes guys that can collapse the pocket in today's NFL because too many quarterbacks are mobile. And when you have that and you don't play a spy, bro, you better not be winning everything like this. If you're winning around the edge, if that's how you win every time, if you can't win through a guy, and not to say get the sack, but if you can't just push the tackle into his lap a little bit, the Lions are going to have problems with that, because now they're going to be asking a guy, and you can do it on pass downs. Houston's not going to have any issues here on pass downs. The quarterback has so far to go. The run threat a lot of times isn't an issue. But if you're going to do that and that's how you win on first and second down, and now it's like, oh, we're not going to put a spy up. Look at our division. We've drafted a guy like Robinson, who I really liked. Terron's way better, in my opinion. But if you would have drafted that, what are you doing with Josh Pascal? He's just a backup now? I mean, I guess. What are you doing with Davenport? He's just here? Like, if there's one thing that we know when a Lions sign a guy or draft a guy, they believe in that guy. Forget what anybody else thinks about him. What I think about him, what the other team did, they believe in him. They're like, this guy's gonna help us. They don't just sign guys and like, wait, we're throwing something just to see if it lands. They sign guys to play. Bro, look, the example I used at the end of the season was Green Bay. Like, the Green Bay game was such a nightmare for the Lions at home on Thanksgiving. Man, obviously offensively, we had some turnover issues, things like that. But defensively, our zone was getting picked apart because there's always holes in the zones. We were getting picked apart. The ball was getting out so fast. It's like, okay, we can't sack him because the ball is out immediately. The first read's open every time. So they came out with a good plan, beat our zone coverage over and over. Lions shifted into man, and we broke this down like play by play what they've ran. And I think we probably have a video like months ago on this. They shifted to man, and Jordan Love went from being, I think it was like 11 of 13, 12 of 14 in zone coverage to being about 50% in man coverage. Yet every breakdown was like a player just specifically got beat. Like, oh, they got him on this play. They got him on this. It was Jerry on this play. It was Branch on this play. Like, so the Lions needed to go the man. And I do believe that game, and I maybe not for them, for me it is, but maybe it was just even a bigger sample size. A game like that has to take the Lions back and be like, yo, yo, what are we doing? We have to be able to at least mix it and have success there. So I completely understand what they're doing. But I'll also say both these guys can play zone coverage. We couldn't like we could throw it out there and kind of dangle it, but we couldn't like stick in it, right? We couldn't just be like, okay, this doesn't, you can't beat this, great. Figure it out. Like New England could do that. New England's always loaded that corner. They could just be like, oh, you can't beat man. All right, you're not scoring. We lost 29-0.